Hello everybody and welcome back to another edition of KerVAM. And of course, if you didn't know by now, we're on episode 27, so you probably do. But in case you don't, we are a Doctor Who podcast with a special focus on all things DVDs, Blu-rays, documentaries, basically anything kind of about the physical media of the show, documentaries about the show, all that kind of stuff. We talk about it all here on the podcast. We've discussed many a collection box set in the past. And of course, today we are able to finally, I think kind of 3 months later than planned, given the release was massively delayed. We're going to talk all about season 22, including that Michael Grade interview, the stuff with Colin and Nicola, the how they dealt with a fix with Sontarans, and a few other things as well. So I think it's going to be a lot of good fun. I, as always, am joined by my three trusty companions, Bill, Ryan, and Charlie. Ryan, have you had fun looking back on season 22? Not a favourite necessarily, but
it's been an interesting variety, shall we say. Two stories really good, two stories very in the middle on average.
Yeah.
Two stories less said about the better, shall we say.
Yeah. I think that's the general consensus is, you know, there's some high points, but not necessarily the strongest season we've ever seen. Bill, were you excited to get another collection box set? I think there's only the sort of second or third one you've got, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's the second limited edition I've got. Yeah, I must admit, I'm not. I kind of go back and forth in terms of my view on season 22. Like sometimes I think it's all right, and then other times I do not enjoy quite a chunk of it anyway. At all. I'm not sure where I would say I am right now in terms of it, but I think it's good that we've at least got it on Blu-ray, because I think it's a good season for them to release, and more Colin Baker is always a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's I'm glad that they've released it, even if it's not one of my all-time favorites, not necessarily one I perhaps would personally have chosen to be the very next one.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily anybody's first choice, but I guess at the stage where we're at, we're kind of just happy with any of them, especially with the sort of increasingly large gaps we've had recently. But hopefully that might speed up in the months to come. And Charlie, did you enjoy delving into season 22?
I really enjoyed delving into the special features of season 22.
Yeah.
I feel it's actually a really good selection of special features this time when compared to even a couple of the previous releases. I feel it's been a really strong one. As for the season, I don't think it's the worst season of Doctor Who. I think it's just kind of, by Doctor Who standards, it's pretty bad, but I don't think it's awful. Sure, we've got two Doctors and Time Lash, but even I was talking with this about this with Ryan the other day. Attack of the Cybermen, I appreciate a lot more. Revelation of the Daleks, Vengeance on Varos, and even Mark of the Rani, I quite like. It's not the worst selection of stories, you know.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, I will just a little bit of advance. I would actually following our conversation, I actually rewatched Attack of the Cybermen again this week, and I will admit it's not quite as wretched as I remember it being, but I still don't think it's amazing, but it did improve a little bit this viewing experience this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate Attack of the Cybermen. I think it's a bit of a bonkers idea that they went for this exceptionally continuity heavy Cybermen story. You need to have seen stories from the 60s to really know the whole plot and why it makes any sense. It's kind of mad. I mean, I know we kind of get it sometimes in New Who now, and even that, people moan about, but the fact they did that in 1985 was, I think, a questionable decision, if nothing else. But there's some stuff to enjoy in there. I like all the stuff. Underground and stuff's quite cool, and there's some moments. There's moments. It's just maybe not an overall brilliant story. Well, of course, we're mainly here to talk about special features rather than the stories themselves, because I'm sure there's another million podcasts out there that have told you that Attack of the Cybermen is not very good before. So we are going to discuss many an interesting feature. I wanted to start off by talking about the in conversation features. Now, these are basically chats between various actors or people relating to Doctor Who, as we found on this release, and Matthew Sweet, who is a sort of broadcaster and interviewer and has done is a big Doctor Who fan fundamentally, and has done lots of these kind of features in the past. We've seen them for many different figures within Doctor Who and previous box sets, but for the first time on season 22, we had more than one. And in fact, we had 3 In Conversation documentaries discussions with Colin Baker, Nicola Bryant, and most intriguingly, Michael Grade. And he sure had some interesting things to say, which we'll come on to shortly. But I thought we'd start with Colin, as he was kind of the first one, the main one. He was obviously the doctor of this period. And, well, I thought it was quite interesting, certainly when you compare it to the Nicola Bryant one. Like, I think it's about an hour and 25 minutes long, this discussion with Colin Baker, and probably only about 10 or 15 minutes of it are actually about Doctor Who. So much of it is about the rest of his sort of earlier career, his life, some, very heavy and tragic stuff about, losing his child at very, just after a few weeks. And I felt like I felt like I learned quite a lot from this. Whereas sometimes some of these interviews, it can just be them rehashing the same old, anecdotes they've told at conventions since 1986. It's really nice to actually get some new and just learn more about Colin as a person. I don't know, Ryan, what was it that struck you about this feature when you first watched it?
No, it was definitely interesting, and him sort of confessing about how he and his family sort of relocated to Rochdale after his father returned from the war, and he remembered that when he was a toddler, he didn't take to his father because of the fact that he was away for such a long time, and the fact that when they got older, when he returned, that he became the head of an asbestos factory, and this sort of. And it's so weird how little people knew about asbestos compared to now, and the fact that his father suffered a stroke when he was in his late 40s, and how he had to go through that, and how his mother coped with it. It got quite heavy at points. And how he mentioned about losing his son. Just before he started working on Doctor Who. Now, I did know this beforehand, but hearing it from Colin himself, it got quite heavy, and I will admit it did get to me a little bit because being an uncle to 2 nieces, one of which is loves Doctor Who and who always wants to watch with me, I will admit it kind of got to me a little bit, and in a very personal way. So, and I felt it added a real insight into who Colin Baker is as a person. And even though, as it mentioned, it was only 10-15 minutes about Doctor Who, I can tell that even just speaking, he seemed like he was really passionate about it, just didn't have that many regrets about it. And this just makes me all the more feel sad for him, because if he was given the right production team, if he had a Philip Hinchcliffe or Robert Holmes, that sort of production team helping him out from the get-go, he would have been remembered as one of the best doctors we've ever had on TV. But
for sure,
I think the problem is because John Nathan Turner was very hit and miss, and in terms of being a producer, and Eric Sayward didn't like him at all, and the fact that the BBC higher ups at the time didn't like the show, so I think he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time, and just hearing him talk about his life and just everything from his point of view, it just made me feel all the more sad for him. And it's just he deserves to have a hero story, He deserves to be the big hero to many audiences, but I just feel like he never got the chance because of everything going on behind the camera.
Yeah, exactly. I think that really, came across, and it's clear how much Colin loves Doctor Who and loves the role, and you can see that. I think it's almost more than any other era. There's so much lost potential from his Doctor and his era of so much of a sort of what could have been with him as the Doctor, because he clearly wasn't the sort of person who wanted to leave after 2 or 3 series. He, as he said, and I believe him when he said it more recently, he wanted to, stay on as long as possible, frankly, because he loved the role so much. And as you say, Ryan, just it was incredible to see him talking about, that idea of losing your son and then 5 weeks later starting on Doctor Who and being able to kind of cope with all of that, and how, talking about how he almost feels guilty sometimes when the scene requires him to be sort of sad or emotional, that he'll think about that trauma, being, to be able to bring him to that point, I thought was a very, just such an insight into him as a person, and just not the sort of thing that you would really get or hear from Colin in any other setting. And I think that's what's so great about all of these features is Matthew Sweet is such a great interviewer in the way of not like he's trying to kind of prod them for information. He's not necessarily asking difficult questions, but just gradually kind of working his way towards gaining finding new things out about these various personalities and understanding them more as people, which I think is it almost sometimes feels like you're kind of, I don't know, hearing stuff you shouldn't be allowed to hear or something. I don't know. I just kind of got that impression sometimes that it's like, oh, this is quite personal. Like, we're kind of listening in. I don't know, Charlie, what was your take from this, I think quite serious documentary?
Honestly, yeah, you two have both hit the nail on the head with my thoughts on it. I feel I don't have too many of these collection box sets. I have 5 of them now. And I do feel that these are in conversations with actors who've played the Doctor are always like the best ones because they played the Doctor and usually they have a lot more to say about it. Ryan was saying, it allows you to like feel like it's very personal and private sort of conversation. So it's like you said, you're listening in, and it's I'm not overly versed in like the the anecdotes and the production stories from Doctor Who since I haven't been a fan that long, but so I'm not sure what people knew from this already and what people didn't, but that was like really surprising. Like there was a lots of stuff in here that I just did not know at all from that, and as well just like knowing, I mean, it was pretty much his life story, wasn't it? He started talking about where he was born, and then in the end, like you said, it was just like 5-10 minutes at the end about Doctor Who, whereas with Nicola Bryant, it was pretty much Doctor Who the entire time.
Exactly.
It went back a bit, but this was more of a chronological, just sort of recalling his life, and it was honestly fascinating. And I feel it's great how we're having these interviews with these older actors who've played the Doctor, when in like 10-20 years time, we might sadly won't have some of them. So it's great to have these
absolutely
rather than we don't have too much from William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee, whereas we're going to have loads with these Doctors. So I think it's great that they're doing all of these and allowing people to know them, feel like they're knowing them more personally.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I fully agree with all that. And Bill, how did this documentary strike you when you gave it a watch?
Well, again, what you've all been saying, I completely agree with. I think it's good, really, that it was as personal as it was, because it allowed us to just really get to know Colin a bit more, and it was nice that, like you say, there wasn't as much talk about Doctor Who in his one. It was more just about his life, the rest of his career and everything. And I think that was kind of probably the best way to do it, because ultimately we all kind of know what happened for the show during Colin Baker's era. We all know about the hiatus and all this drama that was going on behind the scenes and everything. So to kind of just sit Colin down and just talk to him and have him explain like what his upbringing was, how he trained to be a solicitor, which I didn't actually know about until then.
Yeah, it was interesting.
And just how he became an actor in his first few roles and everything. And it was all just really interesting. And I think it just helped to make it more unique, because, like I say, we've heard the same old like anecdotes and stuff about Colin Baker's era on the show numerous times over the years. So to still kind of focus on that a little bit, but kind of more focus on just who Colin Baker is, essentially, I think was absolutely the best way to go about it.
Yeah, exactly. I think I almost enjoy these more to an extent when these sort of features, when they're less Doctor Who focused, because we've got that in all the making of documentaries and convention footage and whatever else, that actually to find this more personal insight into them sort of their life, I think is really, really interesting. Now I was thinking about this because we've had an In Conversation with Tom and Peter. We have one with Sylvester. Did we have that on season 24? I can't actually. Yeah, we didn't we? So we've had all of the classic Doctors. Well, I guess Paul McGann that we could have In Conversations for. Do you think that? I know it's probably been a while since we've seen some of these ones, but I think Ryan, you'll have seen them all before. Do you think this is the best one of the Doctor In Conversation features we've had? I know it's hard to remember them, but yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that would almost be the most interesting one, probably. And in the way that Matthew Sweet does, we'd probably learn more about how he kind of coped with having becoming the new Doctor and then suddenly not being on television again after one episode. That must have been quite something to deal with when you've been given that bigger role. I don't know. That's something for the future, but I'm sure it'll be interesting to hear more about that when it comes to it. Well, let's move on to the Nicola Bryant In Conversation, which I thought was probably just as interesting. Again, all of these documentaries were all quite serious and touching on some fairly serious topics, I thought, and in particular this feature with Nicola Bryant does. Well, there's some quite funny stuff, I guess, really about her pretending she's American for a year and not telling anybody while she's on Doctor Who, which I thought I didn't quite realize it was to that extent that she didn't tell anybody and just had to pretend to be American all the time for like most of season 22 filming, I think it was, until she told Colin eventually. That was fascinating. But then obviously all the stuff with JNT that just was quite sad to hear, really, that she was treated in that way on the show. And obviously as fans there's lots of things we do admire about JNT and what he did for the show and things, but also, and I don't think it's necessarily a shock, but also a lot of stuff that JNT did that wasn't right, and also just, I guess, demonstrating how much the industry has changed as well, really, in only 36 years. That the sort of stuff that happened back then is just unthinkable now, really. That it could have all played out that way. I don't know, Charlie, how did you take all the information on board from this particular feature?
I honestly was actually expecting something like this. Like before, I recorded a series. I recorded an episode for my podcast series, The Best and Worst of Who with Ryan the other day, and that's where we discussed Attack of the Cybermen. And he told me about the Nicola Bryant documentary, and I hadn't seen it yet, and I wasn't actually expecting too much from it. I'd already seen Colin Baker and Michael Grade, and I thought those two were really interesting. I don't think this is going to equal or top them, but it kind of equaled them. I think it was really interesting, and I did expect something like this from what other people were saying. I sort of got the gist that it would be something about JNT because I'd heard things in the past about what JNT was like. It was again another quite sad, a more serious one rather than a light-hearted one. I feel in other ones we've had, like Sylvester, I think his was a lot more light-hearted, and even parts of Colin's and even parts of Nicola's were to some extent. But lots of this as well was very quite serious and solemn. Obviously all the stuff about her pretending to be American and all of that stuff was quite amusing, I thought. Like you said, I didn't realize the extent of it. I thought she just went there and then put an American accent on for the role. I didn't realize that she didn't tell anyone, even JNT. And then but the stuff about JNT and all of that stuff, it didn't exactly surprise me, but I still ended up being shocked when she mentioned it.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? We kind of know enough of JNT now that we're kind of not surprised about it. And that's a shame, because some of the stuff that he did was really bad and really shocking and, completely unacceptable. But yeah, it just doesn't surprise us anymore, I think, which is, a bit of a real shame. Bill, how did this documentary strike you? What did you take from it?
Well, as much as I think when the special features were announced, I think people kind of thought the Michael Grade one was probably going to be like the most, like, at least spill the beans kind of one. I actually think Nicola Bryant's was probably the most out of the three of them, because of what you've all just said about the stuff you said about J&T, about having to keep that American accent going to everyone she worked with, to the press, to J&T, and how she more or less just kept that going throughout, I think, at least most of her time on the show, maybe even all of it. It's really like surprising to just, again, the extent of it, which I never would have thought. And I honestly would have thought that J&T and Colin would have known that, she obviously wasn't American, like, as soon as she was on board. But the fact that J&T at least never found out about it, I mean, that's quite surprising. Not until, I think, later on, I think she said that they met each other later on at somebody else's wedding, and she came out with her natural accent then or something. But yeah, and then just the whole stuff with J&T about like how she was treated by him. In some ways it shouldn't be that surprising, because there have been a lot of quite interesting stuff said about J&T over the years. So on one level it wasn't too surprising, but again, just the extent of it, and just the fact that, when she refused to do a pantomime, how he then got incredibly mad with her. And I think then because of that was how she then ended up not being involved with Fix with Sontarans. Just the fact that it was to that extent, I mean, that I don't understand personally why J&T would be like that. And I think that, I mean, I get it that he might be a bit offended not wanting to take part in the pantomime, but to that extent, again, it's unbelievable, really. So yeah, I think it really was like the most spill the beans kind of out of the three.
Definitely.
And therefore, perhaps, I mean, not to say the other two weren't interesting as well, like they definitely were, but with Nicola's, I think it really wasn't what I was expecting from it going in. And yeah, it was, I'm glad that she at least now feels able to talk about that kind of stuff and to just let people know about it. And I think she even said stuff on a Twitter account about it, like, afterwards. And also just talking about the general kind of working atmosphere at the BBC that she had to put up with at that time, and how, what the kind of culture of the BBC was like back then. It was really quite shocking.
Yeah, it really was. Some of the stuff she was saying about the way she was treated there, and things were really quite, just unbelievable, really, that was just acceptable and just normal almost, really. I don't know, Ryan, what else is there to say, really, apart from it was pretty shocking, but what were your take from it?
This just sort of reaffirmed my opinion that John Nathan Taylor should have left after the Five Doctors. If he should have I think he said in one interview that he felt like he should have left after the Five Doctors, and considering everything that happened afterwards, he should have done, because what he did to Nicola and some of the other stuff a bit later on, it's because there was even some reports. I think one Radio Times reviewer said that he used to work for Doctor Who magazine, and he sort of was invited to the set, and John Nathan Taylor apparently did not treat him and the other, but they sort of, you got really annoyed with him, and he was just like, just keep it says, be careful on my show. And it was yes.
Yeah.
It's not good. And hearing what Nicola has to say, I think I always felt like the character Perry obviously was the weakest companion of the 80s. And this interview kind of explained why, basically, because I feel like Nicola Bryant just got a real raw deal from the get-go. Just the fact that she got the part pretty much after she finished drama school, basically, and being forced to do an American accent, which she even said like it did a bit of damage to her vocal lungs because of the fact that she had to keep doing it constantly, and the fact that she had to keep it up, and the fact that she couldn't. I think she even said like some casting directors didn't want to work with her because they felt like she was lying to everyone, which that really wasn't the case. I mean, when she did her first interview about getting the part, she thought, I'm just going to do it in my normal accent. And they was like, oh, yeah, you are going to. But they didn't say anything. And then it was just like, nope, you're going to have to do it in this American accent, which...
Yeah.
And it's unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. And I just felt really bad for her. I'm glad Nicola has got a new lease of life and allowed to do more with Perry and treat him better in the Big Finish audio dramas and all. But I think she just got a raw deal. I think the entire her and Colin. I think just again. I think given the right production team, she would have done much better. But again, she was just saddled with the wrong team. And again, just like Colin, I just felt really bad for her. And it's just hearing from both Colin and Nicola, it just reinforced me that this whole Colin Baker was just poorly mishandled from the get-go.
Yeah, exactly. I think... it all just reaffirms why there were so many problems behind the scenes, really, because, of the way everything that was going on and the way the leads were being treated at the time. And, and obviously the BBC weren't exactly helping that anyway, as we'll come on to with Michael Grade. But yeah, I think it all just played into that. So yeah, I think it's that thing of like, these were really fascinating conversations that we maybe didn't necessarily expect. But actually, as much as they're quite sort of heavy and serious, they really do add a lot more than just a light-hearted bit of fun one, which can be nice. But actually, if we want to sort of, I don't know, gain something and learn something out of these interviews, I think, they've really done a great thing with these two documentaries. They've really, given that to us. And so, well, we should, of course, come on to Michael Grade, which, well, I'm pretty sure it was the first feature I watched because I was like, this is the one everybody's been talking about. I've got to find out what's going on here. And my conclusion for it was kind of like Michael Grade doesn't really know what he's talking about and doesn't really actually have a clue about what happened with Doctor Who. He just likes to claim that he cancelled Doctor Who, when in reality he probably didn't really cancel it. Because he thought he did after season 22, but actually it had another 4 seasons and he had no clue about this and was like, no, I still cancelled it. Even though it went on for 4 seasons after I'd left the BBC, I still cancelled it. Yeah. Ryan, go on. What do you want to say?
Okay. I'm going to try my really best to talk about it without going off into a massive rant. If I do, I'll apologize in advance. Some of his comments just kind of really rubbed me the wrong way a bit when and some of it did not surprise me really when Matthew Sweet said, did you offer them like any advice on like if there was any way of in some ways it could improve and any like suggestions? And he just simply said, these advice, don't bother, it's all over. And then it's just like he didn't even care about the show. Like it could have improved, like if he just hired like a different producer or writers and to Jet New Life and actually put up a little bit more cash to kind of make it look better, then it could have been a success. But he just didn't want to. Yeah, he just didn't want to improve it. And he even said that when Russell T Davies brought it back, he said, even though he said they've done a much better job with it, he still kind of said, still not my cup of tea, really.
Exactly.
I remember there was one interview, I think it was around the 50th anniversary, just before Day of the Doctor came out, and he said, like, he says, I respect it now, which is never thought I would say, which is what he said, but he also said,
Yeah.
the show still leaves me a bit cold, which is what he said, which is just
Yeah.
so frustrating. And he was just like, he was trying to say, well, everywhere I go, I wasn't the man who commissioned the singing detective or Casualty and all that. I was the man who killed Doctor Who, and which is sort of true. I think it was him and Jonathan Powell. I think Powell easily shares some of the blame in that. I think he was the one, him and Peter Cuisine were the ones that, both of them together were the ones that properly killed Doctor Who. Michael Grade, I think, sort of planted the seed, but I think it was Powell and Cuisine that sort of delivered the final blow, really.
Exactly.
It was, I don't know, and then him saying, like, because the whole saying, oh, it's going to come back better than ever, and him saying it was just all a bit of BBC publicity, really, just to try and calm everyone down. And it just seemed like he seemed like he really enjoyed being the Doctor's number one enemy. He kind of, it seems like he's reveling in that, which I don't know if I kind of respect him for, well, having the balls to go that far, but oh my God, it's just sometimes I have a real issue with people with that sort of attitude, and like this kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I think he's one of those people, and him and Jonathan Powell, when he did some of his interviews for that Trial of a Time Lord set, some of the comments he made were very not pleasant, shall we put it lightly. And I mean, it's nice that we kind of heard that Grade was willing to take some time to give this interview with Matthew Sweet, and Matthew Sweet kept a straight face and sort of kept in good fun, which kudos for him. He gets 10 out of 10 for me on that one, but which is something I can't say for Grade himself, frankly.
No, indeed,
what else is there to be said, really? I just still, it was nice for him to give like a full interview, but I still find him to be a massive arsehole. Sorry, but there you go.
It's pretty true. Exactly. Yeah. So yes, the Michael Grade documentary. So Charlie, do you think that we should actually listen to anything that Michael Grade said, or is he literally just talking like he doesn't know anything in reality?
Definitely the latter. I went into this with a fairly open mind, thinking like maybe I might be able to see a little bit of his point of view. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of season 22 either, but as the documentary went on, I just thought, I've been proven wrong. It is just going to be exactly the same Michael Grade we know from Room 101. In the sense that it's, I mean, again, he was justified in showing Warriors of the Deep, but it's just everything, he was saying about like, he was saying like, I tried not to let my own personal taste affect my decisions yet.
That's clearly nonsense. Yeah, exactly.
Like several times he admits, I let my personal dislike of sci-fi influence this. Like, like as you guys were saying, it's just, he couldn't be bothered. That's what it was, because you just, with a little bit of a bigger budget, and that's all it really needed to get back on its feet. And I don't know, maybe someone else other than JNT. And the way he was like admitting that he, it's almost like he sheepishly admitted that he cancelled Doctor Who and like, oh, sorry guys, it was me, but no, it wasn't. There were 4 whole seasons.
Yeah.
Like, it was a bit strange because it's like he was confessing it, yet he didn't even cancel Doctor Who. It went on ages more.
I think it's almost like he likes the persona of being the man who cancelled Doctor Who. Like, I think he sort of actually quite likes being that because he gets to be the villain and gets some, publicity for it and all that kind of thing. and just like his perspective on Doctor Who, like he watched 5 minutes of it and is like, no, it's terrible. Give it no, it's got no hope, no chance, nothing. And like he was going on about how everybody's seen Star Wars in the cinemas, and clearly Doctor Who's never going to be able to compete to that, so they shouldn't bother. And it's like, but that isn't the point in the slightest. Obviously, Doctor Who is not trying to compete with Star Wars when Star Wars is a Hollywood blockbuster film franchise, and Doctor Who is on BBC One in the 1980s. It's just ridiculous that would be like his argument, because the audience would not be expecting Star Wars on your television because they understand what's going on here. So when he said that, I was just like, that's just the sort of laziest, just stupid excuse that you could possibly come up with as to why it should be cancelled. It's just absolute nonsense. Bill, do you share all our feelings of Michael Grade's like stupidity at all?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. I also think he avoided a lot of questions, I think, because I'm pretty sure Matthew Sweet kept on like asking him, but why exactly did you cancel it? What were your reasons? And stuff like that. And he didn't really give like a definitive answer one way or another. He kind of just said, oh, well, I've never really liked science fiction anyway, which,
yeah,
okay, fine, fair enough. Like everyone's allowed to have their own tastes, but it's like even he himself said, you shouldn't cancel something based purely on your own personal tastes.
Yeah, he literally said that.
Yeah, so I don't understand why is he doing it.
Yeah, exactly. It's madness. It's just everything. Like, I really I was really interested. I was like, what's he going to say? Surely he's going to have a good reason behind it. But it was just constant nonsense for 45 minutes, really, wasn't it? Of him just making up excuses, not actually. And you could tell Matthew Sweet kept trying to kind of explain it all to him, going, well, actually, so you see, you cancelled Doctor Who in 1985, which was season 22. And then there was season 23. And then there was 20. And like, he really tried to lay it out clearly to Michael. And he was just like, nah, I cancelled it. I just did it.
And he even said in the interview that he wasn't involved with sacking Colin Baker. He says, yeah, I did do it. But Colin Baker himself said in another interview that he received the orders of him getting sacked came from Grade himself. Yeah. So it's just like, why are you trying to contradict yourself or trying to? It's just okay.
Take a breath, everyone. Take a breath.
I think like this was unintentionally the funniest like in conversation compared to the seriousness of the other two.
Oh yeah.
Ironically, just laughing at how just annoying Michael Grade was being.
Yeah, exactly. Like I would have appreciated him more if he'd just like owned what he actually did and was more, reason. Even if he had the nonsense reasons about, cancelling it because he couldn't compete with Star Wars or whatever, like fair enough. But if he at least could have been understanding of the fact that he put it on hiatus for 18 months, but he didn't. He maybe started that sort of downhill for Doctor Who, but he wasn't the one who really cancelled it in the end. And if he'd just been willing to admit that, that might have made the difference. I don't know, but yeah, it was an interesting one, wasn't it? And well, I think it's got people talking. And yeah, I'm sure it's the sort of one I would revisit every once in a while, just have another little chuckle at, and a bit of a rage at maybe as well.
It's good comedy material.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it. And well, let's move on from these in conversation features now. We've chatted about them for a while. Let's move on to, there's a few other new, sort of specific new things out there. I mean, there is other new stuff we're not going to cover, various new archive features. There's a new commentary on Revelation of the Daleks, and CGI effects on Time Lash. Has anybody seen the CGI on Time Lash?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Is it an improvement on a terrible story?
It's a tiny improvement. I mean, the bit where he goes down into the tinsel lash, as I'm calling it. It's like they put like a blue, like time vortex filter over every single crack and crevice where there is the tinsel and all that. And I could tell they were trying to cover up the infamous parts of it, which fair enough if you want to.
Yeah.
Find the hardest to get rid of the tinsel, fair enough. But it didn't really improve my opinion at all.
No, I think CGI effects don't tend to improve the story, really, do they? It's kind of just,
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of feel like they were just doing it because they can, and there was a bit of money to do it. And we were like, you might as well say we've got a CGI effects update on this. I don't know, Charlie, did you say you've seen it as well?
Yeah, it does not look great. Instead of being bad for 1985, it's now bad for 2022.
Yeah.
It's bad, but more modern.
This is always the tricky thing with CGI effects, isn't it? That because of the budget they're working with, they can never really make what effects that look cutting edge for 2022. So it's kind of like you almost want to make it look kind of period, just a bit better, rather than try and make something that looks updated when it actually just looks quite cheap.
Yeah, but then again, I watched this with my niece, and she kind of was okay with it. So
fair enough.
What do I know?
Well, there we go. Exactly. Clearly, we know nothing. We know nothing. Exactly. Right. Next, we're going to move on to the location feature. Clearly, trying to rip off that Channel 4 program. I don't even know. Where we saw Colin and Nicola going around various filming locations from season 22. I think from Attack of the Cybermen, Mark of the Rani, and Revelation of the Daleks. Various locations from that. Where in Attack of the Cybermen, they just wandered around a bit of London and some fairly unspectacular visuals, I think it's fair to say. But at least with Mark of the Rani, they met the director, was it Sarah Hellings, I think, wasn't it, the director? And they met Graham Harper, of course, director of Revelation of the Daleks as well for the stuff there. And I thought it was just a good bit of fun, really, more than anything else. Like, it's always great to see them revisit it and reminisce and have a bit of fun. I don't know, Bill, what did you enjoy this feature?
Yeah, I did. I mean, like you say, it's good to see them just kind of reminisce about when they were filming, and like I think they were showing like some behind the scenes pictures of when they were filming Attack of the Cybermen, and had all these fans coming up to Colin and everything.
Oh yeah.
That was really nice. And it was nice to them kind of meet the directors, as you say, and I think they even were able to talk to Matthew Robinson.
Oh yeah, of course,
Zoom
of course.
call,
Yeah, no, you're right. I forgot about that.
And that was good. Again, just good to hear like not just Colin and Nicola's like perspectives on working on them stories, but also the director as well. And just to get a gist of the general kind of on the set atmosphere, especially on Mark of the Rani, where I think wasn't there like a load of raining where they were when they were filming it. And
Didn't
people
look like fun.
People getting very soggy. It did not look fun at all. It was nice. It was a nice kind of thing to just another feature just have, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And it was also just good to see what the locations look like nowadays, and see how much they've changed, or I think in quite a lot of the cases in this instance, how little they've actually changed. I think like the ones for that street in Attack of the Cybermen is more or less identical, really, to how it was in the 80s. And then I think that, was it some kind of factory that they filmed for Revelation?
Yeah.
I think more or less still looks exactly the same as well. And I liked the bit where they got that TARDIS prop out. I was trying to figure out where exactly they got it from. I think it may have been the one they used for David Bradley in Twice Upon a Time, or
possibly. I'm not quite sure. Yeah. There must be a few out there, I imagine now.
Or maybe it was just a fan made one or something. But no, that it was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed it a lot. It was just nice to hear everyone's perspectives on what it was like working on them stories, and just to hear how, as much as, again, we know about all the drama that was going on behind the scenes, how ultimately they were still all able to have a really good and nice time with each other working on the show. Which, again, because of how the amount of negative stuff that we know about that era, I think it gets overlooked how when that era did work, it could work very, very well, at least behind the scenes with the people involved and how well they got on with each other. It was really good. If anyone hasn't already checked it out, I would definitely recommend it. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And Ryan, it was nice to see them reunited with the TARDIS, wasn't it, from that scene in Revelation of the Daleks. So it looks kind of weird because obviously we're so used to seeing it all in the snow from the episode. It's kind of almost the snowy scene is synonymous with that story, I think. And obviously it was pure coincidence it happened to snow then when they were filming there. So to see it without all the snow, it kind of looks quite different, even though it is obviously the same location. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it was definitely great to see Graham Harper showing up again. And, I mean, I've always said in the past that Revelation of the Daleks is my favourite of the Sixth Doctor era, and
that is really good.
Possibly my top 5 favourite stories from the 80s overall. I still think it's a great story. It was great having them talking about the location filming for when they were doing the outer location scenes of Tranquil Repose, and how they used the old IBM building for those surroundings, and also seeing Colin Baker wearing that classic blue cloak again was a nice touch, which wouldn't surprise me if part of the reason was for that was so we can try and so that his outfit didn't underneath to not look too distracting. But it was great seeing him in that blue cloak again. I definitely think this was a really good documentary, just reminiscing on all the different locations and talking about the 3 different stories they filmed out on location, having all 3 directors involved in various capacity. It was definitely well done. It definitely really reminded me a lot of the Director's Route documentary.
Season 8.
Yeah, that one. It definitely felt very reminiscent of that, and I'm hoping we get some more stuff like that in the future, whenever they talk about the Key to Time season.
Yeah, there's some good locations for that, isn't there, with Androids of Tara and things like that.
Yeah, and also season 25 as well. I think there was a bit of location for Greatest Show in the Galaxy, Still Nemesis, and Remembrance of the Daleks.
Yeah, of course.
Do some stuff for that. So, it was definitely one of the major highlights of this box set. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I think it was a thoroughly enjoyable feature. I don't know, Charlie, did you get the same amount of enjoyment out of it as us?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like as much as I did really enjoy the Colin and Nicola's in conversation, it's nice to have them interact in a more upbeat way. It was a more light-hearted, fun documentary. It was a bit underwhelming, the Attack of the Cybermen stuff. It felt like they were just trying to get a third story in somewhere. But the stuff for Mark of the Rani was brilliant, and Revelation of the Daleks, I feel it was brilliant seeing the IBM building without all the huge pyramids behind it.
Yeah, of course.
And walking around that pond with the cliffhanger with the statue, falling over. I feel that sort of area was the place that looked very similar, even without all the snow. And it was nice seeing the directors as well. I feel I think I prefer this to the direct route because it has both the directors and the actors.
Yeah, I think it works quite well, doesn't it? Yeah, having that sort of dynamic of them, and did we get the impression that they hadn't met Sarah Helling since they filmed Michael the Rani? Was that the impression they were meant to be giving us, or?
It did seem that way watching it.
Which is always just interesting, I think. It's like, it's been nearly 40 years, 35 years. It's just crazy.
Absolutely. And I'm hoping, again, they do more stuff like this in the future, especially if it means reuniting with people they haven't seen in a very long time.
Yeah, definitely, exactly. So yeah, that was a very fun little feature, as I say, a bit more lighthearted and a lot of fun. Seeing all the locations is always great, so that's definitely something worth checking out. We'll give a quick mention to, they did a new making of documentary for the Two Doctors, because it didn't really actually have one. The only thing it previously had on the DVD was this slightly odd feature with, who was it? Was it Gary Gillett, who was just wandering around some random places discussing being a production manager or Doctor Who or something. Like it was a very odd feature from the old DVD days of, I think it was about 2004 or something. And yeah, it was just very odd and didn't really tell you anything about the making of it. So they thought, let's do a new one, let's do a proper one. The only thing I thought was a shame about this documentary was the fact they didn't go to Spain, because it was I'm sure it's because of COVID and the fact they had to make it during that it just wasn't possible to get, a few actors and stuff out to too Seville to do it. But, I feel like that just could have added that little bit extra to the documentary, because it was really good and really insightful, but also was kind of your classic Talking Heads documentary, maybe more, that we became accustomed to into the DVD range, rather than trying to do anything too dynamic or different with it. I don't know, Charlie, what did you think of it?
I did enjoy it, but having seen, every time I watch a classic Doctor Who story on DVD, I always watch its making of, and it did feel a lot like those, but just it looks more 2022. It looks a bit better than some of the early 2000s ones, but it wasn't like offensively bad. It was just kind of there when compared to some of the better features like the location, and the behind the sofa, the in conversations. It was, it was just sort of, also there. But it was okay. I felt the anecdotes that they were talking about were kind of, everyone had already heard of them. Like, it was really hot. And they were talking about, where they were filming in Spain, and it felt like they were spending half the time talking about how good Patrick Troughton was. Which is, good, and I get, why he probably was. And I was a big fan of Patrick Troughton too, but it felt like they were just reiterating the same sort of viewpoints a lot.
No, it's true, and I guess the sort of biggest behind the scenes story of To the Two Doctors was this whole they got a load of makeup or wigs sent off to the wrong place, had to delay filming by 3 days in Spain. But everybody's heard that before a million times. We all know it. And so it's kind of like there's not necessarily that much new they could add in. And right, I don't know. There was this slightly odd thing they threw in there with this Sontaran they'd got dressed up, walking around in front of like a CGI background of Spain, just blasting and stuff. I don't know. It seemed a little bit odd. I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell that it was supposed to have been there. If they
clearly intended to do it there and then realized they couldn't.
I don't know, it just looked as if it was superimposited in there. It just looked a bit obvious. So it is a shame that they couldn't actually go to Spain to actually do it properly. But I mean, I suppose with things being as tough as they are at the moment, it's kind of a little bit understandable. Although it still looks a little bit odd when you watch it. And as for the documentary, it just kind of felt like they didn't add that much. And it is basically talking about a story that, well, it's with Time Lash, it is basically part of the double bill from hell, basically. So, this didn't really enlighten much on the fact that they got a good holiday out of it. And I'm just like, well, I'm glad people got a good time out of it. Just a shame the final product wasn't very good, but I guess those are the breaks.
Well, yeah, exactly. I think, that was the impression you kind of got. I don't know, Bill, did you learn anything new from this documentary? Did you take anything from it much?
Well, like the rest of you, I found it pretty underwhelming, really, as a making of documentary. I mean, not to say it was like terrible, but I've seen more interesting documentaries, really. I mean, like you say, there's probably just not much they really could have done ultimately.
I think so.
That hasn't already been said about the making of it. But what I did find interesting was that I think the story was originally going to be set and filmed in New Orleans. And now that was interesting. That was something that I didn't know previously about it. And I must confess, the stuff about all the wigs and stuff being sent to, I'm sure Colin has kind of in one bit he says he went to Scandinavia, and then I think in one of the behind the sofas he says it went to Germany, so I'm not too sure where exactly it went.
The memory cheats and all that.
But I didn't personally know about that, so that was that was a fun little tale. But again, there just wasn't much I think new that they really could have said about the two doctors, really, other than they all had a really good time in Spain, which it's good. Yeah,
exactly. And I guess I think we can be critical, but also we obviously appreciate that it's there, and we wouldn't want it to not be there. It's still nice to kind of tick the boxes of making of documentaries, because there is very few classic Doctor Who stories that don't have like a 30-minute behind the scenes documentary about the making of it. And so it's nice to add another one to the list with the two Doctors, even if it's not necessarily bringing that much new information or in that much of an innovative way, shall we say. But yeah, I think it's still ultimately happy it's there. It's just maybe not one of the kind of highlights of the box set, I guess. Well, now the interesting thing that we have to talk about is A Fix with the Sontarans, which of course is rather infamous, and I think we were all quite surprised when they announced it was going to be on this box set, because they'd originally put it on the Two Doctors, and then everything that came out with Jimmy Savile happened, and so the Two Doctors DVD, like whenever it was kind of reprinted a bit later on after all that, they removed it from, and we thought, well, it's just going to be erased from existence because it's got Jimmy Savile in it, which is fair enough. But they decided, no, we're going to put it on here, we're going to add a commentary, and we're going to re-edit it, and so that it can be acceptable and be watched. And well, Ryan, what did you think of the change? So, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, the change is essentially that they removed the whole Jimmy Savile scene at the end and replaced the bit on the screen with a load of Sontaran ships, and then just kind of cut to cliffhanger, and that was it, really. I don't know, do you think it worked all right, Ryan?
I think they got around it the best they can do. I mean, if they were going to include it, this was basically the only way that they could do it.
Exactly.
Basically, and the effect that they used looked appropriately 80s.
It did, yes.
And which does help make it feel a bit more seamless. So I definitely appreciate it for that. And to an extent, the fact that they've gone to this extreme to try and remove Jimmy Savile at the end, it's definitely commendable. I'm happy that they've done that, because they were like, this is still a piece of Doctor Who that needs to be there, even if it's not very good, it's very incidental.
Well, is it canon? That is the question.
Yeah.
There's a debate.
Yeah, kind of like dimensions in time to a certain extent.
Indeed, yes. It's best not to think about it, isn't it?
Yeah. It's kind of like just one of those Doctor Who oddities, basically.
Yeah.
That exists out there. But so they were like, this is still, even if it's an oddity, this is still something we need to keep in there. So I'm happy that they decide to alter it, and this was definitely the better way of getting around it. Still doesn't change my opinion on it, although I still found it very there and whatever, but it was nice that they did that, and it was definitely a much welcome change. Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And Bill, did you just have similar thoughts? It was positive to have it there in this slightly changed form?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad they included it, but I don't know. I suppose I was kind of perhaps expecting a bit too much, but I was kind of hoping that they would kind of maybe, like, obviously to get rid of it is completely fine, but maybe to kind of address it somewhat in the commentary, because I listened to the commentary as well. But I suppose ultimately that is the kind of thing which would deserve its own kind of documentary or special feature about separately. So I think the approach they made was probably the best one they could have made ultimately. And the story itself it's fine. Like Ryan said, it's very incidental. It doesn't really add much to the show overall, but it's there. And if people want to watch this edited version, then they can do that now with this Blu-ray and everything. But yeah, it's good that they at least included it. I think, like I say, part of me kind of wanted them to kind of do something a bit more with the whole Jimmy Savile controversy and everything. But as it stands, I think it's fine enough as it is, and I think they did the best possible job that they could do with it.
I do wonder whether it would have just been a bit tricky to actually tackle the topic of Jimmy Savile and being able to, I don't know how much they would have been able to talk about it and, doing it in the right way. I think it probably was maybe too much of a risk possibly to really delve into it too deeply. I think just because of the subject matter and things, it might have, I do agree with you. I think it would have, and I think it would have been nice if at the very least, like, they'd put a little message on the screen before like when you're watching a Fix with Sontarans at the start saying this has happened, this was removed for this reason, just to give somebody who doesn't know anything about it a bit of context, because I think it's quite important to be able to watch this and understand the context of it, because it's pretty significant. So I thought that was a bit of a shame.
Oh, so I remember when they did that Sontaran documentary for the Sontaran experiment, and remember that they completely edited out any mention of Jimmy Savile in there, and especially Colin's remark at the end when he said Jimmy Savile is much more frightening than the Sontarans, more, and I'll just leave it at that. And which is
because of course wasn't that was done way before it all came out, wasn't it?
Yeah, about,
as well, which is
4 or 5 years before that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and well, Charlie, anything else to add on this rather unusual feature?
Yeah, like you were saying, Elliot, it could have done with a little message at the start for context, because, like, you know, for someone who, you know, had never watched it before, it must have been really confusing. Like, what on earth is this?
Yeah.
I quite like how they got. I'm pretty sure Colin voiced a couple of lines over the, you know, the shot of all of all the Sontaran ships, but that's, you know, that was sort of the only way they could really resolve it without it just cutting randomly and ending. That said, it's kind of one of those oddities that we've got to have there because it's a piece of Doctor Who, and where else will it go? It's kind of like K9 and Company. No one really likes it, and it's, you know, whether it's canon or not is very debatable, but you've got to have it somewhere, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think it's important to include it. And I think they probably did just about the best job they could have done given the circumstances with it. Well, the final features that we all know and love by now is the behind the sofa features, of course, on season 22, as we've had on all of the collection releases so far. And I have to say, like, I'm not always not that I dislike them, but sometimes just kind of like, yeah, they're all right. But actually, I've quite enjoyed the season 22 ones that I've watched. I have to say, I felt it was really noticeable how, like, every sofa, like, had a very defined, like, opinion and feeling towards each episode, every story they were watching. Because you obviously had the classic Peter Davison, Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton sofa, where they're basically, well, particularly Peter Davison is just like, well, this is terrible because it's not got me in it. Which I thought was quite entertaining. But also it's just Peter going, well, this is a bit rubbish, isn't it? Which, you know, I feel like that's kind of what he generally does about Doctor Who a lot of the time. Maybe that's just his kind of character trait. And then I thought it was also quite an interesting combination putting Wendy Padbury and Sylvester McCoy together. Of course, that was kind of an unexpected duo. I can kind of, you know, obviously we've got Wendy on because he's got Patrick Troughton in one of the stories, so it makes sense. But it was kind of an unexpected duo, and you're never quite sure because you don't know how much they kind of know each other as to whether there's going to be any real chemistry going on there. But I actually quite enjoyed them. I mean, their sort of trait was like, oh, this Doctor Who, it's really violent, isn't it? It's all a bit grown up and a bit too much. And then you've got Colin and Nicola and Terry Malloy. And I just love how much Colin loves his Doctor Who. Like, he's just so proud of it. Even he doesn't care what anybody else thinks about it. He just thinks every single story he did is like the greatest Doctor Who episode there's ever been. I just love his enthusiasm for it. I think it's so much fun, and it just makes you want to appreciate them more almost because you just know how much he loves everything that he did in Doctor Who, which obviously comes across in many different things he did. But I just felt like particularly in these behind the sofa features, you could just see it every single time. He's like, oh, isn't this great stuff? Oh, I'm loving this. Look at this performance. This is great for 1985. You know, he just seemed to love it. He really, really enjoyed it. So I don't know. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with Behind the Sofas. I don't know, Bill, how did you feel about these Behind the Sofas?
Yeah, like you, I had a lot of fun with them. I really enjoyed Peter Davison, Sarah Sutton, and Janet Fielding. Like, they were really on fire in these ones. Yes. So they were really, like, I think in some ways the highlight of it. But it was, like I say, it was nice to have Colin Baker and Nicola and Terry Malloy also kind of commenting on each story. And I think with them, it was very much kind of looking back on what, you know, their own work, as it were, with like nostalgia and everything, and just really just remembering the good times ultimately, which, you know, is kind of what you want to the people actually involved in that era to kind of be doing, because again, we all know about negative stuff from that era. So it's just nice to have something positive, just to have Colin and Nicola and Terry just kind of talking about how much they just had so much fun together and just had a great time. And then, Wendy Padbury and Sylvester McCoy was, I think initially, like you say, it was one of those pairings which we were a bit unsure about, but I think it did actually do quite well. And as much as as you say, like Wendy kept coming back to, it's a bit too violent, isn't it? And all this, in some ways, I did kind of agree with her. I do think season 22 was definitely very violent. Not to say that Doctor Who shouldn't be like that in some ways, but at least at times. But I feel like they really did. They really did push it to a new extreme with season 22. I mean, I think the scenes which were violent, it kind of made sense in the context of them. I know everyone kind of doesn't like the fact that the Sixth Doctor basically just used a gun and killed a bunch of Cybermen, but it does make sense in the context of the scene. And then his whole flippant attitude to the acid bath in Vengeance. Again, I know some people don't like it, but it at least makes sense, even if it is a bit strange, it does make sense at least. It does remind me very much of kind of that James Bond kind of way of looking at death, of just kind of making flippant remarks about it. Yeah,
exactly. No, that's really true. I think it's I guess it's this thing of they've never seen any of these stories before, and they only see clips of them as well, which definitely makes it more difficult to follow the stories and really understand it all. So I kind of understand why they come across with those sort of opinions sometimes, I suppose. I don't know, Charlie, who was your favourite sofa of the lot for this set?
For me, it was definitely Peter Davison, Janet Fielding, and Sarah Sutton. They're just the iconic trio at this point. They're sort of guaranteed for every box set. I feel they sort of served the function, especially Peter, to critique it. Whereas I feel Sylvester and Wendy were more watching it, they were watching it for the first time. And then we have Terry, Colin, and Nicola, who are their function is to reminisce. So we've got 3 different purposes for each one, and I feel that was very obvious here, as well as I've been recently rewatching season 24. But definitely those 3 were just great, especially no shade to the other 2, but definitely Peter, I feel I really enjoyed.
He certainly was strong in his opinions and thoughts about these stories, I think it's fair to say. And Ryan, I think that Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton will probably have watched pretty much all of Classic Who by the time we get the end of the collection releases. Did you enjoy their contributions on this box set?
I think if you see one of the behind scenes with them on it, I think you pretty much get the general gist of what they're like together. And I mean, I don't mind. I mean, and I think they are good fun, and I'm still excited to see her come back as Tegan again.
Yeah, of course. We forget this is happening because I don't bother promoting it, don't we?
Yeah, exactly. I still maintain that Janet Fielding's Tegan was the best thing about the Peter Davison era, and her and Ace are the best companions of the 80s by far. And so, of course, that's the main reason I think the only reason I'm interested in this final episode that's coming in October, November.
Somewhere then,
I still enjoy Janet's presence and Sarah Sutton's. It is nice, and I thought this behind the sofa selection was definitely enjoyable. I mean, I think it's pretty much guaranteed at this stage that any behind the sofa is pretty enjoyable. Even if it's not the most substantial, insightful, meaningful new entry, it's fun nonetheless.
It's just a bit of fun, isn't it, really?
It's always a welcome presence on whenever these new box sets come out, definitely.
Exactly. I think it's always just an extra bit of fun added to every single story that we always get to enjoy, which is really, really great. Well, that just about brings us to the end of our discussion on the season 22 box set. I think a box set where maybe the stories aren't the best, but in the most part, the special features make up for it. I think we've obviously got loads of other features from the DVD range as well, which just really add to it and enhance it. But guys, please do follow us on the socials. On Twitter, we're at KerVAM Pod, and you can check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're going to be back again somewhere soon to discuss probably the Dalek movie releases, because obviously one has come out, the other one's coming very soon, and we haven't tackled those yet. So we'll be back again soon, I hope, to talk about all of those. But until then, from another edition of KerVAM, it is goodbye.